Hello and welcome everyone to a very exciting tournament, a knockout competition where there's going to be some legendary chess players playing the Leon competition in Spain. I'm going to be one of your commentators today, Simon Williams, along with Daniel Naroditsky, who I'm sure is going to point out all the tactics that I miss, which is very likely, I feel. But it's very exciting today, Daniel, because we've got Shirov playing, a legend of the game.
I am super pumped to watch Alexei Shirov. I think most of the people in the chat probably have at least heard his name. He is one of the greatest attacking players of all time, and it really is a treat to watch these players back in action.
It certainly is. Yeah. I mean, Shirov he really is a legend, and he's one of my favorite all time players with his distinctive attacking play. It's nearly always exciting watching his games of chess. His opponent is a young guy, but we'll come to that quite shortly. To start with, let's take a look at the format of this competition so everyone can kind of see what we've got in store for us. And it's really quite a fast and furious competition just with four participants. And this is the semi-final, so they're straight into the semi-final today. And this will feature two players. And it's four games today. Bit quick time limit, 20 minutes plus 10 seconds to move. And the first player, we just mentioned him, is Alexei Shirov. And let's just bring up good old Alexei on the screen here. Now, if you haven't heard of Alexei, where on earth have you been? He is just a legend. And I've played him a couple of times in long competitions, in a blitz game, actually, at Gibraltar as well. And Daniel, you were telling me just before the show that you had the honor of doing a bit of work with him for a couple of days.
I
Was that
did.
correct?
That is good. Well, first, I had the honor of being on the same train as Shirov, from I think actually Denmark to somewhere else in Europe, and then I had the privilege to train with him for a couple of days. I was in Riga, uh, Latvia, Shirov's residence, actually his city of birth. And we did some opening training and some tactics training, and I got to watch the man in action. Even watching him order food in a restaurant is mesmerizing with just the way he does things. So absolute legend, and I have the highest opinion of him. But his opponent is certainly not to be slept on as well.
That's correct. And a young player, and I have to admit, I don't know too much about young Jamie here. I can see on his FIDE scorecard, he's only, I believe, 24 years old. Obviously, a very talented player from Spain, up and coming grandmaster. And do you know any more about him, Daniel, than that really?
I'm not too familiar with his style. I have seen him at many World Youths. So when I was playing in World Youths, he was always on the top boards, and I think he was a FIDE master when he was well into the 2500. So that always caught my eye, how strong of a FIDE master he was. But finally, the titles have caught up with him, and now he's the grandmaster. But these young European players, they're usually very, very dedicated. So we'll see if there will be a changing of the guard today, or if Shirov will prove the veterans strong.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's going to be very exciting. You know, it's always interesting. You've got this age gap, I feel, between like an old legend and someone who wants to take their throne from them. Um, and just one final look at this competition and the schedule now for everyone out there, so you can see what's going to be going on over this weekend. So today, as we said, it's the first semi-final. It's game. We got four games and 20 minutes, so it's going to be quite quick, quite fast, very entertaining. If it's a draw after the four games, it goes to blitz chess, and there can only be one, as the Highlander once said. Have you seen the Highlander, Daniel? Great
I have
film.
not. I have not. Should I leave the commentary, watch, and then come back?
Yeah, go and disappear for a couple of hours. Put the Highlander on.
Mr. Producer, do I have your permission? Definitely on
Probably.
my list now, though.
It's good. It's got some nice scenes of Scotland there, at least.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, there can only be one today, and obviously tomorrow is the next semi-final. I believe at the same time, and then the winners play in the final on Sunday for this Leon competition. So it's going to be really exciting. And yeah, I mean, I don't really know what we're going to expect. I just hope we get lots of exciting chess, Daniel, today.
Me too. I mean, we'll only have one game to focus on, so we can only hope that some fascinating chess will be produced. But I think the probability of that is high, given that wherever Alexei Shirov is, tactical chess, explosive chess seems to follow him. Of course, he's the author of 2 books called Fire on Board, which details some of his greatest tactical wins. I think one of those volumes is behind me.
But
But
an
maybe,
impressive little library there, it looks like, behind you.
thanks. Yeah, I mean, some of them are not chess books, but I think Shirov's book is somewhere there, gathering dust. But I did read it in my time. So they're off, and we have a Slav defense.
Yeah, and actually straight in, I mean, you were saying fire on the board, and immediately we have an opening which has quite a bad reputation. I think rather unfoundedly, the exchange Slav, Daniel, where white simplifies the position a bit by taking on d5. This is something I actually play occasionally as white, as sort of a safe way to try to get an advantage. Maybe Jamie with the white pieces, and we can flick it around maybe so we look at it from the white side. I think that might make more sense. So sorry about that. We're looking at it from the white side always each game. Is playing a main line here, Daniel, with this knight c3, some chances of a small advantage?
Yeah, so I myself have not played the Slav with black, and I played d4 with white, but I don't usually go into the exchange. So I'm not too familiar with current theory, but what I am familiar with is the fact that I do think there has been this turn toward the exchange Slav as a way to play for, I mean, traditionally, as you pointed out, Simon, it's been a way to just make a safe draw. A lot of prearranged draws enter the exchange Slav, but recently, a lot of grandmasters have been playing it to get a slight edge and get a slight squeeze. And against someone like Shirov, that might be a good choice.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, at this level, it's quite important to sometimes play the player, I feel. I mean, I wouldn't recommend always that approach, but if you know your opponent like Shirov thrives in complex tactical positions, to get a symmetrical position where it's a bit simpler to play is not a silly idea. And the reason I play this as well is it's very easy to learn. And I think, as you said, Daniel, the theory is graduating sort of towards maybe white being able to get a small edge in quite a lot of the lines which were considered to be equal. Obviously, when you've got a symmetrical pawn structure, as you have in this position, it's all about the piece play. And the
Mm-hmm.
one thing I found in this variation it's black's light square bishop. If black ever plays e6, for example, in this position, that bishop is locked behind those pawns. So one of the ideas that white tries to do is play against that bishop. And I believe one of the main lines, Daniel, is like either bishop f5 or bishop g4, just to demonstrate this.
Mm-hmm.
And then white found this idea with queen b3, attacking b7. And the main line here goes knight to a5. And after a check, bishop comes back. And now you go queen c2. And we could well see this on the board. We'll come back to it very shortly. But now black is suggested to play e6. And you can see this idea in play here, that the bishop becomes trapped behind those pawns and so becomes a bad piece. So I think that's one of the sort of problems that black faces in this, Daniel, I guess.
Yeah, very subtle ideas, and Shirov. I think he's been playing the Slav for a very long time, but he's been out of sort of regular tournament chess for a couple of years, and when that happens, you might not be fully sort of abreast of the modern developments. And in a game in 20 game, it could cause you some trouble. Here we see Santos playing bishop e2, very sort of peaceful approach. But again, he's kind of asking Shirov this question: does he develop the bishop to f5? Does he play e6? To my untrained eye, honestly, e6 seems like not such a huge problem of that bishop. But maybe again, white is contending for a tiny edge after just knight f3.
Yeah. So this is the decision that black has to make. Will Shirov now play e6, knight to f3, and just continue in this manner when white, I think, is trying to prove a small advantage because of this piece? Or will Shirov play? I guess bishop f5 is a bit more like you're trying to get more from the position. Bishop f5, should I say, because you want to play e6 next move and then prove that your bishop's on a better square. But it does open the doors to g4, g5
Right.
ideas, quite possibly, I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna say one could play in the style of one Grandmaster Simon Williams, a move like g4, and it's been played a lot in recent lines. And g4 seems to be prevalent everywhere now.
It does. I've actually seen you play it a lot, Daniel, as well. With in the what is called the Jabava London system. I feel you're one of the main. Well, I would say the main grandmaster theoretically who's played thousands of games of it on Chess.com.
Yep, I love it. Guilty as charged.
It's a very good opening. I mean, I play it myself as well, as I'm sure lots of people know. We see Shirov going b5 here, though, which is
Wow.
quite committal because pawns don't move backwards, and every pawn move kind of creates a weakness. So this might be a good idea, but you have to watch out for a4 sort of little probing moves as well, don't you? As black in this position.
You do, and you have to watch for that knight on c6, which has lost its support. So if white puts a rook on c1, okay, Shirov's defended the knight with bishop b7, but that's just something he's going to watch for in the future. That c5 square has also been weakened. If white ever gets a knight on c5, that's just going to be a bone in black's throat. So, it's very principled, very Shirov-like, but I agree, it is very, very committal. And that bishop on b7 is a little bit blunted by the pawn on d5. So certain positional problems created by Shirov, those might all be rendered insignificant as the game goes on, though. We'll see.
Yeah, that's right. And it's, I would say, still this positional battle where how bad is the bishop on b7, which is trapped behind the pawns. I mean, I don't think it should be horrendously bad. This h3 move is a very common idea to stop knight to h5 and winning that bishop. You kind of want to keep this bishop if you can. You don't want to lose it to a knight at least. And if knight to h5 now, the bishop has the little square on h2 it can pop back to. Exactly. I mean, castles has been played, and I mean, if I was white here, I'd be thinking of either starting a plan with knight e5 or maybe going a4 and trying to get the knight potentially around to sort of b3 or d3, later on. So this kind of maneuver here you might see like this potentially. I know that's one idea here.
Yeah, I was thinking along the same lines. Or you could put the rook on c1, play a4, and after b4, you could reroute the knight around via b1 to d2 to b3 and eventually to c5. And that sounds like me trekking all the way from San Francisco to Europe, but the reality is these positions with a close center, white is not always in as big of a hurry as he is, for example, in like a knight or Sicilian. And if he does get a knight to c5, it was a Freudian misspoke, knife to c5, that's a huge deal. So you will see how that goes.
I think it will be a knife to c5, won't it? A good old, if you get your piece to this square, this is the problem with pawn moves. As we said, they can't go backwards. So you have to look for outposts in your opponent's position, and c5 is that outpost, where if you get a piece there, black can't kick it away with b6 or d6. So certainly a maneuver white would like to play. So rook c1 seems very logical.
Extremely logical.
Yeah, put the rook on the open file, get ready to play a4 in the position, trying to make Shirov's pawn on b5, do something, go forwards or exchange. And if we have a look at that, well, I mean, they've still got plenty of time on the board, but we can quickly show on the board what might happen. Rook c1, and now Daniel's idea of playing a4. Black never really wants to take this pawn because then the knight can quickly come into this big outpost and the a6 pawn is weak. So black would like to play this move, but then the knight starts doing this little journey around. And because there's not many tactics in the position, it's not a very open position, you have time to do more maneuvering than you would do in a very tactical position. So I like this idea. I mean, I think certainly prefer to be white here, but it can only be a small advantage, if any. Do you think there's an advantage here for white?
Tiny at best, and it will all hinge on, again, as we've been discussing, whether white is able to put something on c5, preferably a knight. But Jaime, okay, bishop e2 to d3. Right. Interesting move. And this really highlights the fact that white really isn't in a hurry here. Interesting move. I guess he's aiming at the king side in preparation for black castling. Maybe he wants to put a knight on e5. Could he be taking a radically, well, I guess we'll find out right now because Shirov has castled instantly. That is a bit of a creative approach. I'm not exactly sure what the purpose is, but I guess the bishop is somewhat better placed on d3 than on e2.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know if he was worried about some knight to e4 move and he was trying to, control the e4 square here. I mean, in these kind of positions, I guess like you, I've played them quite a lot in the London. It's quite like a London system, even a Jabava London system. And one plan I love playing, but this is when the pawn is not on h3, is to go knight to e5 and then maneuver the queen to h3. which can be very
Mhm.
dangerous. But
Yep,
in
that's a
this,
Jababa idea if I've ever seen one.
it is a Jabava idea, definitely. And knowing these middle game ideas is so important for anyone out there who wants to improve. It's not the opening ideas that's going to make you a better player necessarily. It's knowing what you're trying to do in the middle game, where you should put your pieces, and maneuvering them as such, which is much more important. But I don't think this attack is not really ever going to work. The queen can't really get into black's king side, so it's just a very positional approach here with the queen making the rooks now connected. Daniel, I think.
Yeah, Jaime just playing it slow roll. He's not committing to any particular line of play. But something you mentioned earlier, Simon, very very true. A lot of players, they want to buy the latest book in an opening. They want to play what Magnus plays. They want to study all these theoretical lines. But the reality is, at most levels, even I would say almost at my level, knowing the ideas of an opening is worth its weight in gold. And some of the sort of mental capacity that's currently occupied by theoretical lines, some players need to replace it with knowledge of the most important maneuvers, ideas, because that really guides a player's mastery not only in an opening but in the middle game that ensues from that opening.
Totally agree. I mean, it's amazing how many players who want to improve. Well, we all want to improve, but let's say lower rated players who started out in chess that I've been around when I used to coach to many of their houses, and you look at they've got a lovely bookshelf like you have behind you, Daniel, and they're full of opening books. They've got like 100 opening books, and I'm like, wow. I'm like, well, how many of them have you read? And then, well, I've opened a couple of the pages on some of them. It's like, well, it's loads of players. I mean, openings are very important, but the way I see openings is that openings are just a way to get you into a position that you want to play generally, and that that you're playing, that you enjoy playing in a certain way. And
Mm-hmm.
it's knowing the ideas after the opening, not the specific moves, and remembering the moves. I think is so important. But why you putting the queen on e2? Why are you putting the bishop on d3? You got to speak to your pieces. I mean, don't actually speak to them when you're playing a game, because that'd be a little bit weird. Like, hello, pawn, where are you going to go? No, don't do that. That'd be a little bit odd. But you can mentally speak to your pieces. I feel is the way
Mm-hmm.
to improve a bit. I mean, Daniel, you're an incredibly strong player. You're much stronger than me, and this, it's strange times at the moment with this, everything that's going on. I'm sure you want to keep improving and getting better. I mean, what sort of tips for people out there who really only look at the openings would you say? I mean, how can they improve? Should they play lots of different openings, or should they try to stick to one, do you feel, to get better?
I mean, sometimes the experimental approach is good, but my coach would always say this: you're not necessarily playing an opening to play it in tournament play, but you're just expanding there's a good Russian word for it, your field of view, your sort of base of understanding of different types of positions. Because when you only play one opening, you usually only get one type of position, or maybe two or three different types of positions with, and I really mean pawn structure related. But when you get a lot of different structures, even if you don't end up playing that opening in, when tournaments resume, for example, that equips you with just a greater knowledge of plans and middle games in general. That will create impact on your play that you might not anticipate at the start, positive impacts. So I would say, especially when you're looking over these a lot of online tournaments right now that are being organized, when you're looking at these games, don't skip over games that don't feature your openings. Look at some of the middle games from openings that you might not be familiar with, and try to see if you can detect, without the rest of the game notation, some of the main ideas of that position, and that can really help you expand, your field of view, as I mentioned.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's really understanding what you're trying to do as such. And if we go back to the game here, I kind of like the way that Jamie's played this, because we had the idea of moving the rook on A to C1. Okay, we see Shirov's gone knight B4. And this is very interesting, because I think Shirov's now trying to force some sort of changes to the position. As white, you don't really want to lose this light squared bishop. No. It's a lovely piece, isn't it? Like in our favorite sort of Jabava London variations, it's a great piece tucked behind the pawn.
Bishop b1 seems called for, but maybe he wants to play knight e5.
Yes,
give up the bishop for the greater good of accessing the c5 square.
Go knight e5 immediately, so he can consider this one.
I don't love it though. I'm too attached to this bishop, Simon.
I
So
really like this bishop as well. It's very hard to give up this bishop when you're playing these openings. Um, I mean, I'd imagine Shirov's idea is if you go bishop b1, which would be the normal move, and then you're threatening just to play a3 at the right moment and kick this knight away. Shirov, now that he's unleashed the bishop on b7, he wants to put the knight on e4, and I think by trying to make some exchanges, offering this trade on d4 on e4, he's going to ease any problems he has. And of course, you ever take the knight on the e4 here in any position. Black now gets the d5 square. The formation has changed. This pawn could be quite annoying for white. So this is clearly Shirov's idea after knight to b4 to go knight to e4 next.
yep, absolutely. And if white doesn't take that knight on e4, he has to deal with another potential change in pawn structure that ensues from knight takes c3, b takes c3, and the knight drops back to c6. And then, how about them apples? Black is the one with access to the c4 square potentially. So very interesting Shirov-like approach to the position, very concrete and very creative, which are two hallmarks of Shirov's play ever since his young days.
Definitely. And I mean, as white, you certainly wouldn't want to move your b pawn to c3 here, because then, it's a backwards pawn on an open file. If this pawn ever goes there, and you have to be very careful when you change any pawn formation. You don't want to make any pawn formation changes which are going to weaken your position unless you absolutely have to, or you get something in return. I mean, I guess he can try going rook c1, but then just rook c8 here is a very natural move to meet that one. And again, Black is now trying to make the b pawn move in the right way. So you're right. Yeah, this seems like a very concrete way for Shirov to play here as we go on.
Yeah, I mean, Santos now spending 2-3 minutes thinking about whether to put the bishop back. Very compelling idea with knight e4. I don't see an obviously tempting response to it. So my opinion is tilting a little bit. Maybe knight e5 or knight e1 is the correct way to approach the position. The thing is, Shirov could choose not to even take the bishop and still go knight e4. I don't know what to make of that.
Yeah, I mean, so if we go knight to e5, just trying to get our knight around to somewhere like c5, knight e4 is certainly still a possibility for Black. I mean, it kind of seems like Black is looking right actually after this one. I mean, could you go? I don't really like where this knight's going. I mean, you could go potentially knight d2 to try and hold the e4 square, but the knight doesn't seem to be in a great square on d2, and you might have to even watch out for a bishop coming to a6 later on. This kind of problem at some point. I'm not sure.
Right. Exactly.
It doesn't feel right for white. This sometimes you can sort of feel in the position why you lose your best piece, and Black can get some activity on the queen side after this move. So I think this is a very good idea. Knight to b4.
Yep. And bishop b1 knight e4 has been played.
Okay.
Shirov instantly knight e4. Shirov is famously a time trouble addict, one could say. He's also a fantastic blitz player, so hopefully we're going to see some. Well, I don't wish a time scramble upon anyone, but I'm kind of wishing a time scramble upon this game. And Santos taking the knight on e4, so he is going for that pawn structure transformation, yielding Shirov this huge square on d5, but somewhat damaging his pawn structure. Interesting decision by Santos there.
Yeah. I mean, this probably looks reasonably logical considering the other options weren't giving any advantage to white. And now we have a couple more moves. a3 kicking the knight away. The knight finds a beautiful square, but white's bishop has also found a decent square. And whenever a pawn formation changes, you need to sort of re-evaluate a little bit what you're trying to achieve and what your opponent is trying to achieve in the position. And I think now that the pawn comes here, white, both sides' plans changing. And I would have thought that white is going to try to break this pawn down with f3, like in a French defense, this pawn break, and you've got to watch out for these pawn breaks. So that's what I would certainly be considering in this position. I don't want my bishop on b1 to be trapped behind these pawns for the rest of the game. Maybe I can put it on a2, but f3 seems like the most active. Yeah,
I agree. F3's got to be the main plan. Yeah, I mean the alternative is to play bishop a2, but not necessarily to activate the bishop. You procrastinate with that problem, as I did with most of my college papers, and then maybe go knight b3, rook a c1, and revert to that old plan of putting a knight to c5.
Right.
That's a slightly slower approach, and then Shirov might try something along that a6 f1 diagonal, but I'm not exactly sure how to orchestrate that. Maybe b4 and a5. But first of all, of course, Shirov has a choice. Maybe rook c8 in this position discourages bishop a2, because then black's rook could penetrate to c2.
Yeah. So if we go rooks to c8, just to have a look at these ideas in action. Okay, f3 is probably critical, but if white tries to play a little bit slower with bishop a2, the issue now is this is a very nice square for the black rook, putting pressure on white's pieces there and on the pawn on b2, of course. So you can't go bishop to a2, but you can at least consider this f3 move. And I mean, the reason I think we both want to play f3 here is, again, is to open up this bishop. If you can get rid of both of these black pawns here, the bishop is going to become a very strong attacking piece. And just to free up the white pieces somewhat, maybe we can capture there with a knight even. And the knight might come to this square later on. So a couple of ideas with f3. I mean,
Yeah,
if we
I
think,
like that.
I think f3 will be the move after rook c8 that white should be doing. Do we? I mean, as black, I mean, we talk quite a lot about the plans of white here. What kind of things should black be doing? I mean, black, it seems to me, would love to. Okay, so he's gone for, I think, the
b4.
plan you mentioned. Yeah, b4.
Okay, so what are the drawbacks? I mean, whenever a pawn is pushed, you talked about this time, and you ask yourself what squares have been left behind, what squares have been weakened. The c4 square immediately jumps to mind. But knight c4 doesn't really yield anything. That knight doesn't have any prospects once it reaches c4, and it could actually get caught in the crossfire of a potential bishop on a6. So Shirov's idea is, I mean, unless I'm missing something. Well, first of all, he's stirring up some tension in and of itself, but he also wants to play a5 and bishop a6. Potential. Or b takes a3 and get that c3 square potentially for his rook or knight. I'm not sure. Maybe just open up the queen side. So very multi-purpose kind of tactical move, b4.
Very, very active approach. I can see it in the chat, and hello to everyone in the chat. I'm going to keep an eye in the Twitch chat, twitch.tv chess, that is it Evans is asking, well, this is the thing that he doesn't understand. Earlier on, I was saying how good this light square bishop was on b1 and how bad the bishop on b7 is. But I think also, as I mentioned, whenever the pawn structure changes, and of course, after the pawn structure has changed, you've got to reassess the position. And the pawn structure change in the middle has made this bishop a lot worse. These two pawns in red were not on these squares before, and they are now. So this is why the pieces are going to change their dynamic feel. This bishop is now blocked in, and you could see the bishop here, which was a bad piece, actually become a good piece. Because of the idea of trying to get the bishop to a6, which would be a lovely diagonal. So chess is a dynamic game. You know, positions transform all the time, and you want to be on the side of the transformation that benefits you and not your opponent. And it kind of feels black's transformation is quite good here. It feels like he's making more progress. Maybe.
I like this move. I mean, I love these concrete approaches, and from white's side, I maybe would not necessarily engage black by taking on b4, although maybe he should. Also, I mean, I should point out this is a very good move to play in a rapid game, where there's these time considerations. When you force your opponent to make a complicated decision like that, you know, it sucks up a lot of time off your clock, inevitably, no matter how fast of a player you are. So that also has to be factored in.
Yeah, certainly. So how do we deal with this one then? I mean, could we go back to the plan you mentioned
A4
before?
play,
Okay,
by the way.
he's gone a4, right. I was wondering if the bishop, if let's say black plays a5 with this idea of putting the bishop on a6, we now go back to the idea of putting the bishop on a2? Because then
I would say so. Mm-hmm.
Because I guess after bishop a6, we can now block. And okay, our bishop was good at the start of the game, but as we mentioned, it's become worse. And this probably helps white. I mean, white's got a very nice square for the knight on c4. Okay, black's knight's very good as well, but this kind of variation might be okay for white.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, I think that visually Black's pieces look very attractive right now, that knight on d5, but White's pieces have a lot of potential energy. Right now, that bishop on b1 might be lame. The knight on d2, seems like it's not doing anything. But once White gets stuff started on that c file, it's actually hard for Black to generate activity on the other side of the board. His pieces might look nice, but I think White is the one with certain potential for initiative, I suppose. So I'm not sure if I'm in love with Shirov's decision to play b4. I guess we'll see in the next couple of moves who emerges victorious in this sort of early middle game struggle.
Yeah, I mean, it's in positions like this. It's always nice to have the pawn breaks, and we've talked about White having f3, and it's also a combination of having those breaks, but looking at who's got the weakest squares, the better pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel's pointed out that Black does seem to have quite a lot of weak squares on the c file, meaning if White can get one of his pieces to, like, these two squares mainly, it's really going to help White. But Black doesn't have any pawn breaks. I mean, Black would love to play f4. This is the only one I can think of. But if he ever plays f4, he's going to lose the e4 pawn. I mean, if you can go f4, f3, happy days. You've got a Shirov kind of attack going on. But I don't think you'll be able to do that in one move unless you do the sneeze approach and achoo and move it there. But that would probably you probably can't even do that on online chess. You might be able to do it over the board, but you probably couldn't get away with moving it two squares at once. Yeah. So
well, you play f4, then you email your opponent one of those promotions. You won $1 million, and he plays some random move like knight c4 while he clicks on it, and then you sneak that pawn into f3.
Then you sneak.
I'm not advocating that approach to anyone.
No. So don't everyone get on the email and start emailing old Jamie there, for the $1 million. But okay, Rook c1 has been played, and I suppose this is at least trying to meet this bishop a2 idea with Rook c2, as we've discussed before in the position. So we can't play it to b3 if that happens, can we? Trying to trap the. We could.
Ooh.
No, probably not, because c3 is too weak, isn't it? If we lose the b2.
Yeah, knight c. That might be painful. Yeah. Then that square on d5 could be occupied by the bishop.
Certainly. I'll just show that line. I mean, one line I was looking at, I don't think it's going to work, is bishop a2, because this bishop has become bad. So we do want to get it on a better diagonal. We've always got option of capturing that knight. Probably not a good idea, but it's options. But mainly put it on c4. And I was just thinking, if Rook c2, could we try to be clever? Normally when I try to be clever, I always end up looking like an idiot. Always. I mean, this is like, I try to be clever. Oh no, I've just lost my queen. It's typical for me. But I was thinking like bishop b3, and if you take on b2, can we trap that bishop with something like queen d1, trying to go here? But it looks so suspicious, because now that White has lost the b2 pawn, we're not controlling c3. And that
I guess we'll find out, Simon. Bishop a2, Rook c2 has just been played.
Oh,
but
wow.
Rook ab1.
Okay. Much more sensible approach. None of this craziness.
He just wants to chase the rook out with bishop b3. Maybe Rook c2 is a little bit rash by Shirov. It looks good, but how does he, keep the gas burner going? Because if White plays bishop b3, I mean, I guess really no one wins. White has lost the tempo on Rook ab1, and Black will have to evacuate the rook.
Can he go? I mean, f4 is a very committal move, but
very Shirov move too.
It's a very Shirov move. I mean, this is the kind of move, you might expect, because now the e4 pawn, which we were noting, is a problem with this idea generally. But it can't be taken now because of the pin on the knight. And
right.
You have got this idea of f3. I mean, f4 looks very tempting.
It looks tempting to me. I have a smile on my face even as I'm thinking about that move. I've been thinking about a couple of options against f4. White can try queen to g4, unpinning himself and threatening checkmate on g7. But Black can take the calm approach and just defend that with rook f7. And e3 then loses its... I mean, I think it's one of those positions the computer gives like +8. And we're analyzing like fools, thinking that Black is attacking possibilities. Basically the story of my chess career. But from a human perspective, it might be an interesting try. Shirov has had plenty of those attacks.
Certainly. And has he played a move? Let's have a look.
Queen
Is
D7.
he going to play f4? Let's have a vote. Is he going to do it?
Disappointing. Queen d7 played.
Ah, boo. Come back
kicked
to
out
us,
of the tournament.
Shirov. Come back to us.
Yeah, someone in the chat saying we would both play F4 instantly. I think that's kind of true, especially in a rapid game. I think I play F4 after about 5 seconds of deliberation. Okay, calculating. I'll let my opponent calculate it.
I think it's definitely a very tempting blitz move. I mean, I'd probably play F4 without thinking, and then resign. Whoa, what's happening here?
Whoa.
He's off. Really? Can he do that? Is that legal?
Is it legal? Did I just see Rook F to C8?
I think so. I think he's offering the rook on
my goodness.
I
think I see his idea.
Okay.
He wants to play. Okay, bishop takes rook. Rook takes. I mean, Jaime is going to take a couple minutes just to get over the shock of seeing this move.
Sure.
He's going to take the rook. Rook takes bishop. Rook FC1, and then maybe Shirov wants to play B3 to keep that rook ingrained on C2. But I don't think that works. I mean, White has queen to D1 in that position, unpinning the knight and pressuring the rook. I'm all for these types of sacks, and people know that about me. But even for my standards, I don't know about you, Simon, but I am a little bit skeptical.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all up for sacrificing, but not when it just loses. That's my kind of sacrifice. Often I do a sacrifice and it just loses. I mean, but I mean, it's a very interesting idea. I mean, is this a case of Shirov thinking, okay, well, my position is actually, if I have to retreat my rook, it's really not what I want to do, and I'm just going to be worse. So I'm going to try and generate something. But as you pointed out, it could be very, very concrete now. Meaning that, okay, well, White probably should take the rook. And after this move, let's have a look at that line again. If Black cannot find a good way of keeping his activity here, it's just going to be the exchange down.
Yeah.
Which is going to be losing at this level, or it should be. And I like your idea of B3. It certainly looks correct to try and keep that rook as active as possible. But Queen D1's a very clever move there. With 2 threats, knight takes b3 in the position, and also just rook takes rook. If you can get rid of this rook, kick it away, kick it back somewhere else, then you're just going to be doing very well. And the extra exchange in this position is quite good because you've got this massive open c file that you can play on with that rook. It's not. I mean, rooks work really well on open lines, and you've got that c file.
That's huge. And rook fc1 could be met with queen takes a4, but again, queen d1. It's not about pawns here. Queen d1 immediately played by Santos also makes perfect sense. Now the rook has to move away, because if Shirov takes on a4 with his queen, maybe just rook c1 pinning the rook, and then b3, knight takes b3. I think those complications work out for White. So now when Shirov moves his rook away, his knight on d5 is gonna do some heavy lifting as far as covering the c7 square goes. But certainly not enough compensation here. This just looks really nasty after queen to b3, rook f to c1. You mentioned that c file. There's a big problem in this position. White has 2 rooks and Black has only 1.
Yeah, I mean, there's, Mr. Fire on the board, Shirov himself. He loves sacrificing, but one of the problems with sacrificing is, you run out of wood to put on the fire. There's only so much wood you can whack on. When that wood goes, the fire burns out. And it seems here, I don't really see the compensation, as you said here. I mean, the other thing is, Daniel, that White doesn't really have any weaknesses. It's not like Shirov is anything to attack easily. He can't attack the king. He hasn't, White doesn't have any targets. And I'm not really sure what he's going to do. This is looking very bad.
Let's be straight here. If Williams and Naroditsky don't see compensation for a sacrificed piece, that probably means there's no compensation for the sacrifice. I'm very optimistic when it comes to sacrificing. Very. And here we see rook c8. Yes. Somewhat of an admission of defeat. Now, let's not pretend that Black is not lost here, but after queen to b3 and rook f to c1, Black might just be lost here. I'm afraid to say.
I mean, I suppose Black can try knight b6 with bishop d5 and something, but it's a rook. Yeah, I mean, it is. I don't. I mean, again, I'm with you here. I mean, we both love sacrifice, and we're very aggressive players, and it's great to see Shirov playing. But if we don't really believe it, yeah, you're right. I don't think it can be. It can't be enough. It just can't be enough here.
No.
So yeah, it just can't be enough in this
Now,
position.
anything can happen in these games. Sometimes you get nervous. I certainly have had that when playing very strong players and playing legends, and you get a winning position. You feel that your throat, something catches in your throat. I'm so close to beating him. Even in an online game, beating someone like Shirov is a big deal wherever
It
and
is
whenever that happens. So psychology
definitely.
definitely enters into converting these types of. I don't know if you have any stories about choking wins, but the first like 3 times I was winning against a 2,700 plus player, I choked impossible, like completely winning positions.
I mean, yeah, I'm exactly the same here. I'm still in that position nowadays. Even when I'm playing online, obviously everything's online now. But for example, Title Tuesday, the best online competition. If I ever get a good position against a famous name, I just start freaking out. You sort of I'm winning, and I also think this is a common error that many players make, and why many players don't improve. They kind of relax a little bit too soon, and you can only relax right at the end, of when you've got the result in the bag. So okay, White must be doing well here, but you still have to win this position.
And
He has
Shirov is
gone.
Shirov.
He is, and Shirov will find any chances that you've got. Queen
Exactly.
b3 has been played at the moment in this position. So is knight b6 anything? I mean, should we try this? I mean, I think Shirov
I
has to
think
try
so.
something.
Yeah, I think knight b6 should be tried. I mean, I was thinking about maybe playing queen c6 to try to stop rook f to c1 and just snap on c1.
Yeah.
But that might be a little too artificial. I like the idea of knight b6 and bishop to d, because bishop d5 comes with tempo. Maybe you then even trade the knights by going knight c4 and pray that it's like you barricade the door, but eventually that door is going to be blown down on the c file. You can put a bunch of plants there, but they're going to be shoved aside.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So I mean, after this, you at least you're trying to grab the pawn on a4. So I mean, I'd like to play rook c1, but I don't think I want to lose this pawn. So we could look a little bit deeper at this. They're both getting quite short of time now, so we will concentrate on the main moves when they quicken up their pace. But
Mhm.
I'm assuming a5 would be a normal move to counter this. Then can I flick in bishop d5, for example? And now queen d1 looks
Right.
forced again. The queen has nowhere else to go. And does this knight now go to a4 or to c4 here? One of these two squares, I'm assuming it will
Yeah,
attempt
knight
to jump
a4 is
into.
interesting. It's not easy to refute that move because, well,
Yeah.
b3 meets with knight c3 and rook a1 drops the b2 pawn. So maybe
Mhm.
something like this is exactly what. Okay, Shirov does play queen c6.
Okay. So after
So
queen b3, queen c6, trying to stop white from taking control of the open file here. So quite logical as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's not easy to prepare the move rook fc1 without bringing your queen back to d1. I had a crazy idea of going queen a2, knight
Yeah.
b3, and rook fc1, mistreating the queen a little bit, but maybe that's something to consider. I don't know.
Just so you can control this square with a knight, so you can put a rook on c1. I love these. I love these weird moves, like putting your queen on funny
There's a
squares. I mean,
problem. Sorry
okay,
to interrupt
yeah,
you.
go
Queen
for it.
a2,
No, no,
there's
go.
queen c2, and
Wow,
then if you move
bang.
your knight, there's knight to c3.
Oh, nasty! Look at that. Boom. That's painful stuff. And all of a sudden, Shirov will be probably winning in this position because you can't
Yeah,
take the knight
immediately.
because of the queen on a2, and you're going to be losing pieces. You've always got a knight check on e2 if you need it. So it's not so easy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
and Santos seems a little frustrated with himself. Maybe queen b3, as tempting as it was, and he goes back to
It's
d1,
gone back.
which he can
Wow.
afford to do. I mean, it's not like Shirov really has any specific play here, but kudos. I mean, these moves are always hard to play. I know my old coach Gregory Kaidanov calls it saying sorry. It's always hard to say sorry, especially on the chessboard.
It is, yeah. And yeah, I mean, admitting you've actually maybe not put your pieces on the best squares is tricky. And I mean, White just needs to try and get a piece to like C1 and make some exchanges. If he can do that, he's going to be doing very well. But it's not maybe quite as easy as we first thought. I mean, you can't play b3. This is the kind of move you'd like to play, but you can't give up the c3 square. So that means your pawn on a4 is always going to be a little bit weak. And now Shirov is offering a draw basically by putting his queen
Yeah.
back on d7.
I'm going to
Will
go out on a
White
limb
take the
here and
draw?
say it'll be declined. I'm going to go
Yeah,
out on a
I mean,
serious limb here.
I honestly don't think you're going to get a better chance than this to win against Shirov. You are the exchange up. White must be better according to all valuations, but you've got to find a way to improve your position still.
Yeah,
That's the thing.
it's not easy. And rook c1, okay, that maybe forces the rook trade, but I don't want to part ways with that a pawn. He does play
He's
rook
done it.
c1. Okay,
He's
so
done it.
he's done it. And
Mm.
Shirov immediately captures on c1 on a4. He does what needs to be done. And maybe now knight c4. I like that very practical approach by Santos. Queen to c4 can also make sense. He wants to stack the rook on top of the c file. King to f7, lending reinforcement to the f7 pawn. And here we see they've quickened their pace. Less than 4 minutes for Shirov.
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, he's got one pawn for the exchange now. So if you can ever get the pawn on a6, you should always, when you've got an extra pawn, look at where you have the majority of pawns. Black has 2 pawns on the queen side versus 1. So you want to try to, of course, get a passed pawn. So if you can ever get this pawn on a6 down to a3, it starts to become a bit dangerous, but it's a long way away from doing that. And White has now managed to dominate the c file, a5 being played. The one thing that Shirov has in his favor is there's no easy entry square for the white pieces. You can't go to c5, it's defended by the bishop. You can't go to c6, defended. You can't go to c7, the knight. So it's quite hard for white to get into the position. Maybe knight b3 here, potentially.
Maybe. But then
some
maybe
way
queen
there.
a2 or something, muddy the waters like that. But I
Sure.
don't see any other method other than knight b3. As you
Yeah.
said, I hate these situations when it looks like you're right about to infiltrate, and yet you cannot dislodge any of your opponent's pieces that are guarding the squares of infiltration. So maybe knight b3, followed by knight c5.
Yeah, this is something, I mean, at least white's doing something proactive here, but queen to a2.
Yeah, that looks nasty.
It does, as you pointed out. This is a little bit tricky, trying to take that pawn on b2. It's not totally simple.
Yeah, knight b3, there's bishop a6. Now that doesn't look good because it does relinquish one of the key penetration squares, c8 and c6. But maybe black goes after that b2 pawn. Things can happen in that tactical slugfest that whenever there are passed pawns like this, you never know what happens.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, these pawns can be very dangerous here. So it's funny. It's one of those positions before, okay, white is winning, but he's got to find the way to do it. And it's not clear how he improves any of his pieces more. He's got his queen and rook on the open file. His bishop looks very nice on e5. So it strikes me that the one bad piece is probably the knight on d2. But how do you do something with this knight? There's nowhere it can really get to. We'd love to get it to c5. So knight b3 must be critical. And the time situation now as well, they're going to have to start moving a little bit quicker. They are getting 10 seconds to move each. So that's something that's going to at least play in their favor a bit. But knight b3 here, let's have a look at this. So queen a2 seems critical, yeah, in this position.
It does. And then I was thinking about knight to c5.
Sure.
Does that force a queen trade?
Knight c5 would be a move you certainly want to play. If white can get the queens off, when you material up, you want to get the queens off the board. And this, because it attacks the bishop, it might force the queens off. So this could be the way to go. The queens are interposed here. I can't see anything else that black can do rather than take queen. So if we do take the queen off here, the knight is still attacking the bishop. Knight b3 is being played. So we could get this position.
Yeah, queen a2. Now the question for me is, after queen a2, knight c5.
Yeah.
Queen takes queen, rook takes queen. Is that all that bad for black, or can black hold things together with some sort of a savvy maneuver, like bishop c8 maybe, but then knight comes back to b3, things start to crumble? Yeah, I don't know. I'm not seeing anything straight off the bat.
Can we go bishop c6 to b5? Does that have any? Can we get that in just in time? If I can get my bishop to b5.
Yeah, and also knight takes c6 there. You can go bishop b5 anyway, attacking both the rook and the knight. Queen a2 played.
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of thing that could suddenly turn.
Exactly.
It's weird. It's a weird ending because, okay, so if we get this position here, which is very likely to occur, black, if he gets that bishop to b5, the rook is going to have to move, and then your pawns
Played.
start to become nuisance. This has been played.
Yeah, and I saw an interesting discussion in Twitch in the chat. Well, in parallel with the discussion of whether they like this idiot named Nereditsky, but whether that bishop on e5, which looks so intimidating, is actually strong, or is it a paper tiger? I think it's more on the side of the paper tiger. It looks great, but it's cut off by its own pawn on d4, and it would kill to have access to that queen side right now to eat up those pawns on the king side. Now the endgame has been reached. I think bishop c6 Simon played. Very, very nice move. And I think it's the only move to hold things together.
Certainly. Time very, very short now, both sides. With the bishop coming to b5 and the pawn potentially coming to a4, it's a little bit scary. And as you say, this paper tiger, I've never heard of that before, but I can understand what it means.
I hadn't heard of it before I moved to Charlotte. It's a Charlotte chess saying. There are many of them I've started to use on my stream. So yeah, I think it explains that bishop.
Paper tiger. It doesn't have a big roar, that one. It looks scary, but it's actually just a teddy bear. Exactly. I'm assuming it's just a teddy bear tiger, not a good one. And you're right.
I like that too, teddy bear tiger.
Teddy bear tiger.
Rook to c1 played. So he's evacuating the rook from that zone where it can be hit by the bishop. Sorry to interrupt.
No, cool. And now knight takes e6 might be a threat. We'll just very quickly point out in this position, the rook is lined up against the bishop, but knight takes e6 may look like a very clever tactic, because if the black king takes the knight, you take that with check, and this must be winning. But the problem is there's this intermezzo, which is a move in the middle of a combination where black is not forced to take the knight, but black can go bishop b5, attacking the rook, but at the same time, you're still attacking the knight. And this totally changes the table. So the way that Jamie has played this is after rook c1. Well, this is very interesting, because you would have thought
he's allowing knight takes e6. And my guess is he's banking on his past pawns. He wants to play king takes e6, rook takes c6 check, go king d7, and then perform a breakthrough with a3 followed by b3, because it might not seem significant now, but look at that knight on d5. It is guarding the b6 square from where the rook could have otherwise stopped a potential pass pawn on the b file. Typical Shirov, fire on board. He has won so many games like this.
And you can see that the paper tiger is really, really bad.
It really is a paper tiger.
It is. I mean, this pawn on d4 just gets in the way of the bishop trying to cover those pawns coming down the board. So you're really playing two pieces versus a rook here.
It's crazy. So visually appealing, but it's doing nothing.
It is. A4. I mean, is Shirov better here? He seems a bit calmer there. I mean, it's great to see the cameras on the players, and I think he had a nice drink of his whiskey in a mug there. Only joking, of course, it's not whiskey in a mug.
I think he has a bit of a smile. I don't know if that's a nervous look, or I could kind of see the early beginnings of a grin there, thinking, that was just like when I beat Kasparov in 1990 in Leon. And by the way, Leon was the site of many very interesting tournaments. Knight takes c6 played. Now, we're not looking at the computer evaluation to promote actual interesting analysis. The Monday morning Tom Brady's among you can turn on the computers and laugh at us, but it's one of those.
I hate using computers. Sorry,
I do as well. Yeah.
I mean, there's this generation. I'm going to have a bit of a moan. I'm sure just that so many people who I've met, they commentate and they think they're like the world's best players because they're just running the position on the computer. Oh, it's gone to +5. I'm better than Magnus Carlsen. Why didn't Magnus Carlsen see this win of a piece in 20 moves? What an idiot. Turn your computers off. Sorry, that's my rant.
And then see if you can calculate that 10-move combination Fabiano Caruana missed to win the world championship. So I was going to say, my guess is White does have a path to an advantage. In my experience, these positions, generally, White has some way to stop the pawns, finagle his way into a win. But 59 seconds for Santos, that is not a lot of time, especially in a position like this. I think Shirov's thinking about whether to move his bishop from c6. My guess is, though, he's got to take the knight and full steam ahead, bank on those past pawns. I don't think he has time to preserve his bishop.
No. So let's have a look. So if we do take the knight, Santos is going to have to take you a check. We've got king d7. You've got to sort of decide where you want to put the rook. I mean, ideally, the best place for the rook is behind your opponent's passed pawns. But as Daniel's pointed out, you can't get it to the b6 square. behind your opponent's passed pawn. You can put it on a6, and that leaves the interesting question. Well, if black plays a3, well, okay, if you take on a3, which seems very natural because otherwise that pawn is coming, can black now play just in the nick of time b3, where he's 2 moves away from queening, and we see
Whoa.
again. Okay, what's
Sorry
happened?
to interrupt you. I saw that. I was going to point that move out. I didn't think that it worked.
Oof. Okay, we ready? Mr.
That move
Shirov.
is knight f4, and that's why I didn't think it worked.
Because the knight to f4, yeah? Okay.
Because Santos, so what Santos does is he stops knight e2 check. No, but
Yeah.
Shirov's going to leave that knight on c3. That's his entire point. G5, maybe it does work. Explosion on the board. Alerts. All seek shelter. B3 coming. Holy smokes.
Look at this.
What an idea. Sacking a knight in the endgame. D5.
Wow.
What is going on here? Who is winning?
Someone.
It's definitely not a draw. I think it's white.
Oof. Okay. I don't want to. I can't stick my neck out here because I like those pawns. Those pawns look quite scary. But you've got c4 coming in. The bishop.
Rook e1's a great move, though. If you put the rook on b1, it would be in the crossfire of a pawn that landed on a2. Now after a3, c4, and the paper tiger has finally been let out of its cage, and it finally controls that b2 square. But that's not the end of the story. Black can try bishop f6, but I'm skeptical. I'm starting to get a little bit skeptical. White is up a rook after all.
It seems like a complete mess to me. I mean, white's up a rook, but look at these 2 pawns. I mean,
bishop a4, an idea.
Bishop a4, try to come into c2, yeah? And then
maybe.
Support your pawns. I mean, why not? I mean, we can give that a go. I mean, maybe we'll stick with the actual moves played because they're very short of time now.
Bishop a4 played. Maybe it is a draw. I mean, maybe they fizzle out somehow into a draw. That's what often happens in these positions.
Someone saying it's the computer says dead equal. I'm never sure I to believe people like that. I mean, if anyone could look at this position and say, yeah, draw. Yeah, can you not see it?
I could believe all 3 things here. I could believe anyone who says white is winning, black is winning, or draw. Okay, black is winning. I'm not sure I'll believe, but definitely white is winning or draw.
I can still believe black's winning. I mean, I'm a Shirov optimist here.
That's true.
It's they're very scary pawns, but it's a rook. I mean, anything's possible. You can't keep Shirov down, can you? He brings the fire to the board, even in
position. Knight c3. What a brilliant move found with so little time on the clock. So now my question is, let's say white plays knight to e2, and again 17 seconds. So we'll stick to the moves on the board. Knight to e2 played. White is trying to reroute his knight potentially to c3 to lend more reinforcements to that emergency area going on the queen side. White has passed pawns of his own. Right now they're being contained, though.
Sure. So, okay, so now what do we do after this move? How dangerous are these 2 pawns? Should we try to get rid of that bishop? Because we want to play a2, of course, as black, but we can't because we lose the b2 pawn.
Right.
So it suddenly sees that bishop, that tiger, has become a decent piece. So should we go bishop f6? Can we do this to try to get rid of that bishop? We won't. Okay, we'll stick with the game. But bishop f6 looks like an idea. So we can try to go a2, a1. I like these simple plans here. I mean, Daniel, I'm sure. Well, you obviously know, and maybe a lot of people in the chat know this. But one of the maybe the most amazing chess move of all time was played by Alexei Shirov. Bishop takes h3, was it, or a3?
Against Topalov. I think it was just bishop h3. I think there was no pawn there, which made it even more amazing.
You're completely correct. Yeah, just bishop h3 in this opposite color bishop ending was one of the best moves ever.
Bishop takes b2. Whoa, what a move. Okay, so he's saying, I'm going to give up that rook. I don't care. I want to eliminate these passed pawns. Maybe Shirov takes on b2 here and then goes bishop a3. No, he takes on e1.
Okay. I think he's going to go bishop b3 next, I guess. Is that right?
Yeah. Okay, Shirov's going to be fighting for a draw here, but he's going to snap off one or both of these pawns. D6. Oh, no. Oh, d7, bishop a5. Okay, I panicked there for a second.
Oof. Just in the nick of time.
But knight d4 coming in after bishop a5.
Oh, nasty.
And knight c6, they're in. An f5 pawn is hanging.
Oof.
Okay, maybe it's not that bad. Just bishop d5. Just bishop d5.
Bishop d5, yeah.
And then collect that pawn at your leisure. No. That was a blunder. Oh, no.
Oh, no. Look, is he going to show anything facial here?
This
is now losing. I mean, white is winning. White is just about worked his way through the calculations. Shirov was saying something at the end there, like, You know, I mean, very imaginative stuff there. Very imaginative stuff, Shirov. But your judgment was really good there, Daniel. I have to say, because you did say I don't think Shirov's he's not better here, and it kind of looked like it was that way in the end. Yeah.
Wow, 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 wow. Yeah, it's
Okay.
definitely, what an ending. And I think after Bishop D5 there, he could have maybe saved the draw, but these players need to catch their breaths, and so do we. That was a fascinating struggle.
It was, yeah, very exciting struggle. And remember, don't go anywhere. This is only the first game of four between these two players. So Shirov, of course, has lost the first one, but he's got a chance to bounce back. He's got two white pieces to come. He's going to, the advantage of having that first move, and they're going to be starting again in not too long a time. We can just show the schedule now, maybe very quickly for you guys, if you want to, just to see what's happening. This is the first semi-final and they're playing these four games. There's three more to go today. Can Shirov come back after that very exciting game in the end? I mean, it started off a little bit where we thought White was easily winning, and then Shirov shined. He showed a bit of his
Well,
magic at the board.
we'll see.
We will see. So I think we're going to take a very short break ourselves, but we'll be back. Of course, stay here with the action, and we'll be back again very shortly. Well, welcome back. Very exciting first round, that one. The next round's going to start in about 5 minutes, so we've got time to maybe have a look at the exciting points of that game, and we can just dive to, let's say, a position around here on move 27, where white is the exchange up. But after queen takes a4, black has the possibility of using his pawns. And later on, it got extremely exciting when Shirov, in this endings, a lot of people think are boring, but not when Shirov's playing. You look at any of his endings, no, they're not boring. He starts using these pawns, and he now plays this amazing knight c3 idea, sacrificing that knight in order to get his pawns going. And I guess this is quite critical around here. It seemed like Jamie did a very good job of defending here. You're slightly on the back foot as white. You won the exchange quite easily earlier on. Well, okay, you didn't win it, but you've taken the exchange. You know you should be doing well. And then all of a sudden you're under some pressure, and a lot of people could start like freaking out here, which is very possible. But he keeps his cool as white, and d5, getting the bishop back, was certainly a key move. And after, let's have a look at a couple more moves. Rook to e1. I'm just wondering if black could play this any better, Daniel.
No, I mean, with less than a minute on the clock, Jaime kept his composure and c4. I mean, we that narrative of the bishop, which was, again, to use that expression for the final time, a paper tiger for so long, it acquired powers just at the right moment. After c4, that bishop all of a sudden makes contact with the b2 pawn. And then I thought a very practical decision by Santos to give up that rook back for the two pawns, which put immediate pressure on Shirov, put him on the defensive. And, with very little time on the clock, he wasn't quite able to find, I think, the correct sequence of defensive moves, which led up toward the blunder at the end, allowing Santos to use his own extra pawn to win a piece. So very close game, very Shirovian game. And I have a story about that I'll share a little bit later, but just didn't go quite his way at the end. Kudos to Santos for keeping his composure there, as you said.
Definitely. And this is the position where maybe Shirov had his last chance. He played bishop to e6 in the game, but this allowed knight to c6, which was basically a kind of fork here. You're forking the bishop, but you're also forking the d8 square, so you're threatening that one. And of course, white's going to win a piece. The last chance he had was to try bishop d5 to stop that knight from coming in. Okay, white has chances here because he's going to be a pawn up, but is potentially holdable to draw this one with very accurate play, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. And many years ago, I participated in a U.S. chess school chess camp, and each member got assignments at the end that he was supposed to, a little project to do until the next camp. And my assignment was, and it was led by Grandmaster Gregory Kaidanov, who was a very famous chess coach here in the U.S., and he said, analyze Shirov's best endgames. And I rolled my eyes because I knew who Shirov was. And I was like, his games probably never reached the endgame. But then I dug deep and I found that he played some absolutely marvelous endgames, including that endgame against Topalov. So, people's preconceptions about endgames are often just not correct. And we'll see if game two reaches an endgame, because they are often, we have e4, e5 on the board.
Yeah, and we'll let the openings moves play out here. Raul Lopez, as we see at the moment going on. I totally agree with you. It's like, I remember Macau Tao, one of the most amazing ex-world champions, who's famous for his sacrificial play. And a lot of people assumed, okay, he loved giving up pieces, sacrificing, therefore he can't be good at endings because he's a tactician. If you actually look at Macau Tao's games, his endgame play was extremely strong. And you can see a lot of similarities between Shirov and Tao. They both attack a lot, but their endgame play is brilliant. And, when you attack, what are you going to get from your attack? Well, you're not always going to checkmate. You might just get a slightly better position. So you've got to be able to use the advantages you get and you've got to be good at every area of the game. And his endgame play is phenomenal. So we're into a position here after bishop g4, which I don't know so much about, but this must be all normal theory, I'm assuming, at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know much about it either. It's a rare guess, I think, to play knight a5. I mean, the main move on move 8 is to castle. And then after h3, knight a5 is just the Chigorin variation. I guess the idea of this, I've always heard that playing knight a5 first was considered inaccurate. But nowadays, a lot of players are turning over old lines that are considered to be bad, and they're reviving them with new preparation. So I'm sure that this is not a case of mixing up the mover. Santos has prepared a potentially neutralizing line, and I guess his idea is, well, after d takes e5, I imagine he wants to take the knight on f3 and then recapture on e5, and basically claim that with the symmetrical open pawn center and possibility of putting a rook on c8, the position is equal. I know very little about this, so I'm completely outside of my depths here.
You're not the only one. This is an opening I don't really play myself, but we can see maybe quite a unique idea. And I like the way you said that. Sort of players nowadays at the top, they're trying to find, everyone's trying to find new ideas in the openings at this level. But I love the way that people go back to forgotten ideas and bringing them back to life, because playing the same thing time and time again is not really going to get you to I mean, it's a bit boring as well. You're just copying all the time, and are you really learning? You've got to try to use your imagination a bit as well and create your own things over the board. So it's certainly interesting, this one, bishop g4, a little bit of pressure on white's center here with that bishop. So okay, he has taken on e5, and now black has given up the bishop pair. The bishop pair is talked about a lot in chess. The bishop pair is really nice to have it, and that's very often true in very open positions. And it does seem, with no pawns on the C and D file, the position is opening up, should benefit the bishop pair, but it's quite a symmetrical position yet again, it seems, as well.
It is, and you mentioned another thing, Simon, that I wanted to bring up, which is I don't know how to call it necessarily, but chess is less rigid now. So it used to be the case that you would have a certain positional or tactical advantage, like the bishop pair, and people would use that to conclude that, let's say, white is better because he's got the bishop pair and all other factors are equal. Well, nowadays, I think people are developing at the top a much more flexible approach toward the game, where certain factors that always were considered indicators of a stable advantage computers are showing that a much more concrete approach to the position is called for. And it's less about weighing general factors and more about considering the specifics of any given position.
Yeah, totally agree. Computers, again, computers are sort of ruling the chess world nowadays, and they can be an extremely good tool for finding ideas. But I must stress, do not, if you're trying to improve, don't make them the be all and end all of your analysis. You've got to be able to think for yourself. And I know so many players who look at the computer and just look at the assessment without understanding what is going on in the position at all. Turn the computer off a lot is one of the best things you can do, I think, if you want to understand the position.
Much like turning a phone off at the dinner table, for example, you just get this wave of fresh air. And I also know players who, they'll judge their own game by the number of quote unquote computer mistakes that they make. Oh, I made so many mistakes. Computer evaluation shifted so many times. My accuracy score is low. And they won't even give themselves credit for very creative ideas that could have even won them the game. But, computers often bury these ideas that used to be considered brilliance. And, at some point you just go insane from all of this. So I agree. I'm on the same page here completely.
Yeah. I mean, I find often if I'm playing in a competition that I don't often like putting my game. I might think I've played a brilliant game, and if I analyze it with the computer straight away afterwards, the computer will basically tell me what an idiot I was and that all my ideas were rubbish. And you get a bit depressed, and it's like, well, okay, computer, just go back in your box.
Exactly.
You don't get too carried away with the computer. Use it to help you create things, but not to dictate your way of playing. I think it's really, so many players use it for the wrong reasons now. I mean, back to the position, bishop e3 played. I suppose the key, can black now get the knight to a good active square somewhere like c4? Is that
definitely tempting?
Yeah.
At first I thought maybe knight c6, knight d4 is an idea, but now knight c4 looks especially tempting because it hits the b2 pawn. Now maybe what Shirov wants to do is let his rook out onto d1 and then slide his bishop back to c1 so that he can then chase the knight away with b3. But then we get a similar theme to the last game where that knight on c3 has lost its support, and potential rook on c8 exerts more pressure than it would with the pawn still on b2.
Yeah. So let's show that line that you just suggested there. If black tries to go active with knight c4, threatening a pawn, you're trying to sort of destabilize white's pieces over here. And if Shirov goes rook d1, attacking the queen, I'm not sure where the queen will move. Even a5 looks like a good active square. And now you go bishop c1, so your rooks are coming to the middle of the board. I mean, with b3 is going to be quite hard to play because your knight is quite
Yep,
losing.
exactly. Yeah, Shirov has played queen to c8, preemptively moving his queen away from a line of fire of a rook on d1. Yes, he wants, and he's threatening b4, by the way, which wins a piece.
Okay, so sorry, this is Santos played queen c8.
Oh, Santos, sorry, not Shirov, Santos, yeah.
Yep, with the big threat of b4. So white logically lines his rook up against the queen, and that's always, well, nearly always a good, easy move to play. If you can get these pieces out of the way, the rook will be very useful. I don't know if black's really shown a big idea here in this opening so far. I mean, you'd think that white should have something here, some small advantage. I would imagine with the open position. And okay, queen e6 is clever, centralizing the queen to a good square.
Yeah, but maybe knight d5 now. I mean, it just doesn't look, like you said, it doesn't look like there's an air of extreme prep knight d5 played. Opening up that bishop and that pawn on d5 can be both a blessing and a curse. It is isolated, but it also controls a lot of key squares, such as, okay, rook c8. Wow, maybe Santos is still in his preparation. I don't.
Maybe, yeah.
It's one of those things you just don't know if white has a big advantage or a small advantage or no advantage at all, and it might be the latter. But yeah. He's got to have something. Let's say b. Okay, maybe now b3, but again, I don't want to weaken that complex of squares. Bishop a3 follows.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, this knight looks very nice. Having a knight on a central square where it can't be attacked easily by a pawn, and keeping it on that square must be good. But it's kind of maybe, what about the bishop on c2? If you can get it somewhere in the game, if things open up, yeah, white's advantage would increase. But at the moment, you can't get this bishop in the game naturally as you play. So what do we do? I mean, do you have to play a bit slower, bishop b1 and then go b3? Okay, he's gone to bishop a more active
d3,
square.
Yeah.
With maybe you do play b3 at the right moment, just to try to, there's an expression in England, I'm sure you've got a similar one in America, that knights on the rim of the board are dim. Knights on the rim are dim.
Yep. I think it's knights on the rim are grim.
Nice on the, okay, pretty
just
much
to be different from Britain.
Yeah,
can't be the same, right? It can't be the same expression.
Of course not. So knights on the rim are grim. Yeah, I mean that sounds fair enough. And that knight, it could be grim. It certainly could if it can't get into the game, and if you are able to sort of trap it on that square. Okay, and the time situation, they both move very quickly, as you said. They got to this position, move 18, without spending a great deal of time. It could be preparation. Still.
Yeah, but I don't think something tells me it might be one of those things where he didn't necessarily prepare this line to move 25. It's more that he decided he asked him, well, how do I surprise Shirov and maybe play something I've heard is decent recently? Maybe he didn't look too deeply, and I would be very surprised if Shirov didn't have even a small advantage here. I mean, bishop takes c4 looks very sensible, and black has to ruin his pawn structure a little bit.
Yeah. So let's have a look at this. So the knight has come into c4. It's a good square. So Shirov taking that off would seem natural. And then at some point, the pawn will capture here. These pawns are now being split. Normally, splitting your pawns makes them weaker because they can't defend each other. Before, the pawn on a6 was defending the pawn on b5. But here, they're more weak, as we can see. And the pawn on c4 especially could be a target at some point. I mean, the kind of thing I'd love to do here as white is go bishop g5 and bishop takes f6. But I don't think I can do it just about in time. I want to keep my knight on d5, and I want to sort of keep it there so you can never exchange it off. The only piece that can exchange this knight off is black's knight on f6. So I'm thinking, okay, if I get rid of that knight, great. But if you do go bishop g5, I think black can take on d5, I guess.
Yep, and then slide his queen. You can get away with that. Well, here Santos is taken with the rook. So
Okay.
I think White's most
Because
straightforward approach is to take back and go rook to c1, putting pressure on that c4 pawn.
yeah, and just play very simply like this and say, okay, you have a weakness. I'm going to try to attack it.
Exactly.
Yeah, not normal and natural way to play. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
I
looks
mean,
good.
and if you defend that pawn with rook c8, there's an undermining motif there with b3 potentially. Maybe finally that move is actually good.
Yeah.
I don't like what Santos is doing here. He's playing very quickly, but all of my instincts are telling me that White should be quite a bit better here.
I agree. There's a nice little, mini tactic here. After b3, you'd like to get rid of your one weakness as black by capturing that pawn, but oh dear, you don't want to do that now. And I'm sure everyone in the chat, well, maybe not everyone, I'm sure most people can see the nasty blow here, which will win the game immediately, which is just rook takes rook, and then knight takes bishop, and this will not just win a bishop, but win the queen, win everything. So rook to c4 played. Shirov still thinking about the best way to play this position.
Yep. If knights on the rim are dim, then what are knights in the center or in the middle? I don't think there's any convenient rhyming word.
Knights in the center are just blooming brilliant.
Are better, are better.
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't really rhyme, that one, does it? Not so much. No. So yeah, I mean, talking about Shirov, who is a legend, and a lot of people might not know some of the history of Shirov. Obviously, Santos is coming up in the chess world, but Shirov, from what I know of my history of chess, was kind of hard done by, really. I think around the late 90s, because they had the qualification for the World Championships, and around the late 90s, Shirov was at his peak. Chess players generally peak. I don't know what age. I mean, other people have told me you peak when you're around the age of 30, but it's obviously different for a lot of people. I'm well past it, by the way. But chess players peak, and he did very well in the run up to the World Championships. He beat Kramnik to gain the right to play Kasparov for the World Championships. But then what I think is true, I mean, I might be slightly off of my facts, but what I think is true, Kasparov basically said, I don't want to play Shirov. He basically said, no, I actually want to play Kramnik instead. And Shirov's like, well, hang on a minute, I've qualified to play you for the World Championships. Yeah, I've beaten Kramnik of all players to face you. I deserve facing you. And obviously the pay packet, if you get to the World Championships final, is massive. You're talking like nearly $1 million, whatever happens.
Right.
And Kasparov just says, nah, I'm going to play Kramnik anyway. And he went and played Kramnik in 2000, and Kramnik became world champion by beating Kasparov
in London.
In London, yeah, it was in 2000. I actually had a job there at the chess, and my job was actually it was nothing to do with chess. It was showing people to their chairs.
Still,
it was great. It was great.
You probably showed some strong grandmasters to their chairs.
I probably did, yeah.
With the skills that grandmasters have these days, maybe you also taught them how to sit down, but
and stop. Yeah, be quiet over there. But it does seem like Shirov was quite hard done by, because he lost his chance of ever becoming world champion. You don't get many chances like that in life. He never really, affected him massively. And it wasn't very fair treatment. I mean, that's kind of what happened really around that time, and he did get hard done by, the poor guy. So I kind of feel for him a bit in that situation. Probably Kasparov regrets it a bit as well, because he lost the World Championship. He could have,
Yeah, now he would die to play Shirov. Actually, I changed. He should be like 7 games in. Actually, I changed my mind.
That's it. Yeah, this Berlin defense. No. Bring back Shirov. I'll play him. Kasparov had a massive score against Shirov in their individual encounters. He really knew how to deal with Shirov. I think it was his opening preparation, because Shirov's very aggressive approach, it kind of backfired a lot against Kasparov. But it's still unfair. It was unfair treatment of Shirov. So obviously an incredibly strong player at the moment, but he lost his chance at the title.
Yeah, definitely. He definitely did, and it's one of those just injustices in the chess world.
Yeah.
But yeah, of course, his career is he's played